So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live, something we do every Monday afternoon. Just a reminder, the profiles of the panelists here are is listed on the mondaylive.org. Most important comment I'm going to make is that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization of this group. Please do post questions and comments on the Zoom tools. I think we all know that by now. And just a reminder, this deck is on mondaylive.org if you want to see any of the links on it. So this month we're having numerous discussions about using the smarter stack, and we'll continue that today. Before that, we'll just have our normal chit chat, and then we get into week number 4 of using the stack and see where that goes. But before we do that, I'm going to open it up to the panelists and let first over to Ken.
Thank you very much, Anto. Okay, we've got our August issue online, delivering smarter buildings, following the Monday Live theme for last month. And we're working on our September issue, and of course, smarter buildings lead to smarter sustainability. And the decarbonization and electrification piece. I think that's greatly changing the industry's purpose and why, and it gives a great opportunity to express ourselves and how we can make a difference and lead the transition. And I'm working with Brad, our contributing editor, one of the Carbon Kids, and he shared this resource, which so it should be a good issue. There's lots of things coming up, lots of things I wasn't aware of. This 100-page PDF is a reflection of what's happening here in British Columbia, Canada. They've done this building electrification roadmap for British Columbia, and that's pretty much in the sights of what the consulting company is working on these days. There's some other stuff across my desk. Was a decarbonization expo in Japan. The consulting kids have been using a lot of CO2 heat pumps because the freon is part of the sustainability equation when it escapes and gets into the freon or gets into the atmosphere. We know that it's bad, and we know it's also going to escape. So if in fact the new heat pumps have CO2 in them, it's less of a problem. So just that kind of a thing, and Japan seems to be leading in that technology at the moment. The other thing I've done as a result from last week's Monday Live was I created using Monday Live open source stack tool. And what it's dawning on me is that as we more use the tool, the greater its value increases, and the examples of how people use it, they keep evolving the tool. If somebody does something that we hadn't expected, and we say, yeah, that's a good idea. One that came up last week was you putting dotted lines around the parts you don't do. Which is a good idea, because that's sometimes very necessary to show not only what you do, but to show what you don't do. I was really impressed with the presentation on the fire station, kind of showing all of the pieces and showing a very complex relationships between a whole bunch of operating platforms down there in the exchange and data sections. And how they might interact in a simplistic way. So every time we kind of see an example, I think it feeds us to create our own example, and we encourage you to do that. Back to you, Anto.
And next we have John.
Hey, I want to follow up on one thing that Ken said. I had read an article this week, and I didn't put it on this page here, but I think I'll go dig it back up, about this whole thing about our heat pumps as good as we all thought they were. And I'm not going to quote it because I need to go find it and bring it back. I'll bring it back for next week. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of scrutiny on them as far as a solution because of a couple of things. the relative efficiency depending on climate, and of course, as you mentioned, the refrigerant issues. So I'll try to dig that out for next week. So anyways, one of the things our conversations intersect with is smart cities. I thought this article was interesting. It was on Wired. And the idea that smart cities were a bad metaphor for what we're trying to accomplish, and they imply a lot of things that don't get accomplished, right, or can't get accomplished. And I was immediately drawn to the work we've been doing to say smarter buildings, not smart, which anticipates some type of known guaranteed end state as opposed to improving things. There was a similar theme in this article, along with a lot of other really good commentary on, what's possible depending on the city, and if only one service or system gets implemented, isn't that still a better solution, right? As opposed to this idea of a well-known guaranteed end state. And then the other thing, had to include it, maybe some of the other speakers will, but we started getting together a year and a half ago to understand how this new phase of humanity with the pandemic was going to affect all of us. And more companies are delaying the return to office. Big companies who had made pretty big statements about when people had to come back, and now they've delayed them further. And I'm sure most people is we're all watching and waiting and trying to go forward as in the different things we do. But there seems to be, if we're looking at the pendulum, it's swinging back a little bit in the other direction, I guess is a way to put it. So that's what I got.
Thank you, John. I think Anno.
Snuck it in at the last minute. This is just something that I think we brought up last week as well in our meeting last week, but just a press release from Siemens, a week ago now, last week. You can see the key statement down the bottom there about them wanting to build, buy, acquire technologies in the smart building space, which is interesting. It's an interesting article. I should have posted the link for you guys, but it actually goes on to say, Rebellious actually goes on to say about, they do have a team of, really clever engineers all focused on smart buildings, but they're looking at acquisitions as being one of the paths to accelerate that. I think the big point about it is just, much more awareness of the big guys coming out with, getting into a space that they thought was defined, but realizing probably isn't defined, and looking to acquire, build, buy technologies to move in that space.
Great, thank you. I saw this over the weekend. Obviously, these are very, very big numbers that's being sort of discussed in this country and others. And the fact that, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, even all of the money that's being discussed is nearly 6 billion, short of what's actually needed. I don't know what to make out of this. Maybe there could be a little bit of discussion here, but it's just sort of the size of these numbers are staggering to me.
You said that came from a civil engineering point of view?
Yeah, apparently the American Society of Civil Engineers did an infrastructure report, and it's on this. It's linked on this in this article, and they reckon that it's gonna we need 13 trillion in infrastructure through 2039, which is 18 years from now. It's not a long way.
Anto, did you actually read the article to get an idea of what their definition of infrastructure is?
Right.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say too.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is actually not the a lot of it, or most of it, I think, is the sort of what people are calling the hard infrastructure.
Mhm.
roads and bridges, but also transportation. A lot of it was transportation. There's a section in it about airports.
You mean like railroads, public transportation, that type of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, well, that makes that. I mean, to me, that all makes sense. Particularly a number of you, Anto in particular, has been overseas recently, and when you go see the airports and public transportation that's in Asia in particular, and you compare it to the U.S., we are way behind. And so from that standpoint, we've got a very much an aging infrastructure that isn't being replaced and upgraded.
Well, if you guys are familiar with China's Belt and Road Initiative, right? I mean, that's 90% of that money is coming from China, though, Stephen.
Right.
And a lot of countries are learning careful for what you wish for.
Yeah, right.
Malaysia just went through that phase about a year before COVID. China came through and wanted to do a big Belt and Road infrastructure. They proposed to do a high speed rail from KL down to the bottom, down to Singapore. And the government, they were going to move forward. The government got thrown out. New government came in and said, "Nope, we're not going to be beholden to China." That lasted 6 months, and now they're back and they're funding a big infrastructure project. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot going on, but follow the money, see where it's coming.
Yeah.
The money's coming from, right?
Yeah. Okay, just no more comments on that. Anybody else have anything that didn't go up on the slide? Okay, so using the Smarter Stack, just as a reminder that the link is stack.mondaylive.org if you want to see the stack. What we learned last week, Pete Scanlon did a stack, and I agree with Ken. This was really sort of a good way of presenting it, explaining what was the rationale behind it, the purpose, and then digging into the different levels. I think he went almost too detailed, but that was good, but it may not be necessary on that degree. So we want to continue this. We have one guest that I'm going to bring on right now, but it's an open invitation to anybody in the audience here. If you want to present a stack either today or another time, please do so. Shout out here on the chat or by email or whatever other mechanism to do that. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to invite Paul Campbell, who is actually using Keith Gibson's account. So I'm going to invite Paul/Keith to on stage. Hang on one second. Panelist. And I think we all know Keith. Paul, maybe not everybody knows, works with Keith in this new venture called Facil. And I'll let Paul, aka Keith, on the screen tell us about what you guys are doing and how you put that, how you lay that out on the stack. You need to share the right. There you go. You there, Paul? Hello. I think it's your next tab on there. Hello, Paul. Hello. We've lost your share. So Paul, can you say something? Make sure we're connected. Okay, we have audio problems again today.
Keith's lost a bunch of hair.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. Looks like he's connecting again, so.
So I'm wondering if while we're waiting, we should move on, do some other stuff and come back to Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. I also did a stack for Paddy for my perspective on life, and let me share that, and then we can come back to Paul. So this is the Paddy Smarter Stack. So there's two parts of our solution. One is Paddy itself, which is the platform, the cloud platform. And the second is the connection profile architecture, which is now called CNS-CP. CP stands for connection profiles. And so this, and these are kind of their relative, their positions. The Paddy is really a delivery tool, and CNS-CP, the connection profiles, is in the exchange layer. And our purpose should align with the purposes from building owners to reduce complexity, to create single sign-on for their digital assets, so that they can have efficient operations, to maximize system value. These are all sort of the value propositions that we align with. The operations, the sort of people that we see using this architecture are facility managers, maintenance and service providers, property assets, and other people that use a single pane of glass kind of architecture. Paddy sits in the delivery, so it's used by system integrators and installers, consultants. And in terms of the technology, in terms of the tools, we deliver ourselves using mobile, web and mobile, and then down the road VR and AR as and when they become available, and obviously as a single pane of glass, either local or remote access. The key part of what this architecture does is to provide a place for the apps, whether it's analytics apps, modeling or simulation apps, other types of apps on the right-hand side here, management tools, AI and ML type tools. And we do that by the creation, by the use of a Paddy app store into which all of these different apps can go. In the exchange layer, we work with the connection profile mechanism, works with obviously connection profiles that are created by anybody. We also have interactions with IAM kind of technologies and things like ADAP and Active Directories. We implement a lot of the standards, both technical interoperability standards as well as semantic standards, sort of the haystacks of this world. In terms of data, pretty much any sort of source of data is what we target to bring into using the connection profiles to connect to applications and also to users. And the systems, obviously the typical range of systems that exist in buildings, everything from BAS to IoT. And the physical itself is buildings, smart cities and utilities, and large assets. So that's kind of how we present the positioning of Paddy and connection profiles. Would love to get any questions or comments.
So you don't hold the data, right? So your solution is not holding the data, it's connecting data sources or providing a connection mechanism, which those are actually two different things, right? Connecting, doing it, or providing a mechanism are two different things.
That's correct. The connection profile is the mechanism that we created that is now open source. that provides that mechanism to connect data with consumers of data, whether they're apps on the app player or other pieces of data or other sort of other tools. And the PADI is the mechanism that presents that information then up to the operation level or to the users.
And you put PADI in the delivery layer. Do you want to just explain that a little bit? Because I think it'll help, we're all trying to zero in better on the definitions of the layers, right?
Yeah, and I think the conversation so far have been that in the delivery layer, there's really two kinds of things. We're either talking about people and companies, which are really sort of on the two boxes on the left here, system integrators, and consultants, or energy consultants, for example, and facility management consultants. So to us, they are the people who would use PADI to deliver services or to integrate applications or to integrate other sort of information that's below on the stack. And on the right-hand side is really thinking about the technology that is used for delivery. And this is kind of what we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks, is the delivery can actually be people or organizations, or it can actually also be technology or specific tools such as web. So that's why I separated it, and I did it on purpose to actually put the people side, people and organizations on the left, and the technology on the right.
And Joe, this is different than when we first started doing this, it seems like to me, where you're putting something in all of the layers. Are you saying you're delivering something in all of these layers? Or if you were to put dotted lines around the ones that you're not actually delivering? I'm trying to understand how it goes top to bottom like this.
Yeah,
and
so
how we were doing it before.
Yeah, and I was just reminded when Ken was mentioning the dotted line that I hadn't done that on this slide. In fact, pretty much everything will be dotted line with the exception of this one in the middle, the PADI App Store, and everything else is dotted lines. And what we do is the PADI platform and the connection mechanism that allows the managing, orchestrating the connectivity, and the App Store kind of is a connection between the link between them. But everything else you should consider as being dotted in the new.
Actually, the dotted line is becoming really important because that's really a part of all of our messages, is what we do and what others do and how we interface with others. There might even be some different kinds of dotted lines that would evolve into the tool. But anyway, yeah, that would, if you actually had all of those things in dotted lines except the centerpiece there, yeah, that conveys a very powerful message in my mind.
I was going to say, are you saying that you're connected to, influencing? How would you describe all of these other boxes as far as the relationship back to PADI?
Either enabling or orchestrating, those kind of words, right? We're enabling an app to find data that it can use, for example. That's the way I would describe it. So an analytics app or a modeling app would need data from somewhere. And the data could actually be in multiple locations. And what Connection Profiles does is it enables that application to find and connect to the appropriate data contextualized to that building. So
technically, you're providing connection profiles also.
Well, connection profiles,
open source it.
Yeah, connection. The actual profiles that get connected, that gets created using the connection profile mechanism, can be created by anybody, right? So the definition of what a profile is.
That on the other half of it, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, that's why I put it in two separate boxes.
But that engine that you guys have created to enable that is really a big part of what you're delivering.
That's this part of it.
Yeah. Sorry.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, but you already provide some or a suite of connection profiles, right? As part of PADI.
we have a starting suite, but the
Okay.
number that's going to be created by others in an open fashion is going to be many more times what we have.
Right. Right. Okay.
And I did another slide, which is kind of thinking about who we deal with, and this kind of gets back to the dotted line thing, which I actually did this before the dotted thing came into view, as it were. So this is us, and the users are typically here. The users are people who actually use a product. Customers are typically people who actually buy products. So this is how we would describe that. App developers would be people that we would work with. Connection profile creators will be people that we would work with, and app developers, same as this, but in a different location, a different type of app developers, and obviously the physical is the same. So this is another way of thinking about how we think about relationships. And I did another one, which actually is focused on the connection profile part, to go to your point, Anno. And these are kind of use cases of how connection profiles get used. So in connection profile, there's a concept of a broker. So the broker really sits here, right, in the exchange layer. There's kind of potential of an edge broker that could happen here, but I'm not too sure about that. But so these are the types of systems that are being the connection profile helps orchestrate in terms of how they connect with other entities.
Okay. Yeah. This actually helps a lot. I actually learned more in this couple of slides, Anto, than you've been telling me for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So, I agree with that totally. This has been a useful exercise for me to try and understand what the heck you guys have been talking about for the last 10 years. But, good stuff.
So, Paul, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
I'm here. So I'm going to stop my
sorry
share.
about that,
You want
everybody.
to bring up your stack and tell us what Facil does?
Thank you for your patience. I was getting a little nervous I wasn't getting connected here. So, and obviously I'm standing in for Keith. He's laid up, something hit him over the weekend, so he didn't read me into this. So Anto and I had a conversation earlier today, and while my impulse is to expand on what you see here, I decided to keep it as straightforward and simple as possible in this iteration. So essentially what we're trying to do at Facil is to, one of our chief objectives is to influence the maintenance budget. When you consider the nature of HVAC assets across a national retailer, for instance, with several hundred and possibly thousands of facilities, it does become, you get tied up in all sorts of knots related to asset management, so on and so forth. But where most of the folks at facilities get wrapped up is in their budget. They have to not only develop a budget, they have to maintain some kind of tolerance to it. So when we look at our value proposition, generally the first pass is through the operational budget. So you're dealing with the energy manager and you're creating efficiencies. And one of the things that we've observed and certainly recognized that there is an influence on the budget. So this representation is focused strictly on how our product is designed to also influence the budget. So one of the things that we found is if you can build a facility to manage high volume, low amplitude decisions and things that tend to consume people's days unnecessarily, or just get them on that hamster wheel and they never seem to exit, that creates sort of a new branch on the value proposition. So we are developing and have developed some robotic processing. The idea is to take some of the analytic product that is coming through the gateways and sort of loop it back into the decision management process. So if we can map out their decisions, which is a pretty tall order, you have to do that with some delicacy to articulate what their decisions are, what the KPIs for managing that process are. The idea is to obviate a lot of the signals traffic that tends to clog up their day. So you can imagine when you produce a portfolio of analytic product, it's not just a handoff, or at least I think we've all probably experienced some frustration with sometimes you can't anticipate when a client or customer is going to execute on something. And I've had some frustrations in the past where we frame the value proposition as what we present, but they still, even if they don't come out and admit it, they need some sort of execution engine. So although this is sort of top down, this really does become a loop, because if you produce an analytic product, that's going to ultimately loop back to how you perform relative to your budget, and the intelligence also helps inform the next year's budget. With every output, you're creating a more tuned input. And although I have to confess that this just sort of articulates all the steps in processes, it doesn't in this iteration reflect the loop. So I just wanted to get that point across, that what we produce is intended to loop back to the client, to their decision management process, to help their internal process become more efficient and more intelligent, perhaps smarter as opposed to smart, to borrow from John. So that's primarily it.
If you can just sort of walk us up the stack, maybe, or down the stack, either way, from the top or from the bottom.
Okay, so we'll work from the bottom up. So our clients tend to be the national retail community, and we do have some university campus clients. The two are slightly different engagements, but they can follow the same pathology. So they employ various types of systems. Either they're building controls, or they have in one case we have a client that's using a product known to everybody, or SkySpark. They just introduced that to us, and it was interesting to have that available to us, and that's a campus environment. So let me direct you to the retail environment. So what we do is we gateway into their automation systems, and it's a two-way communication. So we can command to the units to maintain set points and schedules, so on and so forth, to drive efficiency that way. And when we find aberrations or the suboptimal performance, we produce a signal that will ultimately trigger an outbound communication to the client or to their robotic process. Ultimately, create some sort of physical intervention through their vendor community. And again, I'm pointing that at the high volume, low amplitude decision making. The more sophisticated things for like chiller operations, I'm not naive enough to think that they're going to, automate that at least in these early days. So I think there's some branch off to when we encounter that sort of thing, that there's going to be some sort of manual intervention. So we have some sort of signal for action to be taken there outside of the robotic process. And again, our chief contact would be the facilities manager and possibly the energy manager in this engagement. So and it's interesting, I think we've all probably experienced this as well, is that at least in the retail community, the energy manager has the energy budget, the facilities manager has the repair and maintenance budget. And they tend to report up to the same vice president, and there's a little creative friction between the two. So it's sort of a little delicate diplomacy that has to be exercised there.
So Paul, this is Steve Fay. So I've got a few questions to make sure I understand what your product consists of. So I assume the gateway is a piece of hardware you install on site to gather the data from the different system or systems?
The gateway is software.
It's software, okay, runs, but it runs on a server somewhere?
It would tend to run on a client server.
On-prem or in the cloud?
In the cloud, I should.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So your product is an analytics product that runs in the cloud, and part of what it does is a gateway, and that is strictly to normalize and grab data from different sources.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
All right. So once you've got the data, in the cloud, now you're applying your decision tools and your robotic processes against that data to affect either an alert or a closed loop process in some fashion.
Correct.
All right.
Yep.
So how do you contrast what you're doing versus an analytics package like SkySpark or the other ones that are out there? What's the difference between what you're doing and what they do?
I have to confess to not being up on the latest with the product offerings out there, but my sense was or is, and it could be a little bit outdated, that the decision management is something that's not, at least my observation, is not out there, not being addressed. Now, that I should point out decision management as opposed to decision support. There is an entire field of study on decision management, and they do make that distinction. Mm-hmm. So while that alert ops for action would be a decision support facility, the robotic process in say a bot type environment for a contact center, that would be part of a decision management facility.
Okay.
So there's a lot of simplification in decision management in that box in this slide here, but yeah, that's what we're trying to achieve is decision management as opposed to decision support.
Got it. All right, so guys, Atto and the rest of the team here, the way Paul's broken down essentially the product architecture into SQL and the gateway and the decision management tool and the robotic process, because it's all of that is sort of one, could be thought of as one big app. But he's taken the time to break it out separately. What do you guys think of that approach versus just having a single line item as an app?
It's interesting. I think one of the uses of the tools, right, was to show where, you know, and it doesn't have to happen. Like, well, Anto's example, for example, with Paddy was very much in the context of interaction with other pieces of the stack, right? That was part of the mission of Paddy. I guess in the case of Paul and Keith's thing with Facil, you know, they're providing a complete end-to-end solution for the customer, completely. But you know, from what I see here, they've got the different components, which I think definitely helps understand, you know, what the pieces are and how the application works. And to me, is a big. Don't have to imply that it has to interact with other things, right? And I think that's a good discussion for the group here from a use of the stack. Just because I've got, or Paul's got a component here, does that necessarily imply that it can or should or would or might interact with something else or some other third party thing, right? And maybe there's some other annotation that we could do, just like we did, you know, dash lines to say these are the things we don't do. Maybe something like, for argument's sake, a double line is a, you know, it's a self-contained module that only works with itself or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And I think you bring up a good point, because I think we have to, for our sake, I think we have to be prepared to encounter that environment where we might have to branch off into to parallel vendors. I think that environment. I don't know if we can, you know, be a closed off system to their other vendors. So I could see a lot of interaction that way.
One of the questions that I wondered about asking, because we've seen this a number of times, right? A number of boxes that are really making up a vertical stack, right? And in a way, what we're trying to do, the trend that we're seeing is that vertical stacks are rigid and they're not very flexible, right? And the sort of layering sort of provides a level of flexibility that would be beneficial to the purpose, to the owner. So one of the questions that I think we can ask is that if somebody has a stack like this that deals with a number of pieces, components up and down, which one of those boxes is your core value proposition? If you only had to do one, if you had to give away, if you have to stop doing the rest because other people can do it, which one are you best at doing?
Before anyone answers though, that, Anto, are you putting people in the spot to say, you know, I have to, it's like picking my best child, you know, I don't know, I can do that.
Well, what occurred to me was, would it make sense to draw kind of a super box around the stuff that you're delivering as part of your platform?
Yeah, right.
And which is kind of very, you know, similar to dotted lines around the stuff that you're not. But in this case, where he's broken what I believe to be their platform down into, you know, 4, possibly 5 boxes, it would show us that, hey, our platform consists of these 4 elements or these 5 elements. Is that what I'm seeing here, Paul? If I understand, you're delivering from a platform and code standpoint, if you will, but all the way from the robotic process down to either just the SQL in Azure or maybe in the manufacturing specific part of it.
Yeah, I think you got it pretty well nailed down. So if I was to pick like the central thing, only because it's so vital. If we were to look at the gateway library that we have to exercise, I mean, it's the heartbeat of everything, and from there it spokes out to you know, two-way communication to the field, as well as populate you know, data in the Azure environment. It ultimately will inform robotic process and you know, ultimately the decision management. So so you can see, yeah, if I had to pick one, that would be the thing. But I think that's sort of the center of the wheel.
It's a little bit though, and I understand what you're saying, Paul, and I agree with you 100%. But Anto, back to your question, it's also a little bit audience centric, right? Because you know, if I see this layout from Keith and Paul, I go, hey, you know, this robotic process looks really interesting. Is there something I can, you know, collaborate with, or you know, which you know might not be their favorite child, but it's a good one, you know. But that's my interaction and perspective, you know. So I you know, I think your question has to be, it's a little audience centric as to, you know, who's asking the question.
And I suggest that we look at another dimension is the layer. And if we layer these stacks together, let's go back to Anto's analogy is, this is my family. And so I show all my children. And then when you click on each one of the children, it brings up the details. And I'm wondering if that adding another layer, adding a simplistic layer to the top of it, showing where your product actually fits. And then when you click on it, it'll take you to the next slide, which will divide up those pieces.
Yeah.
Like one of the big advantages of all of this is over paper is that you have that third dimension of being able to click down and click back up to see what you're actually looking at.
Yeah, and
that would be useful.
And this could be done on this slide on the Facil gateway or in the decision management tool, whichever. Those are kind of the core, and not the core, the kind of the middle. That the gateway probably has a lot more issues, a lot more things that can be said about it. So if you can almost create another slide that says Facil gateway, and then it will have that level of detail. Then you don't need to worry about, you know, improved maintenance budget, because that's already been defined at the higher level.
Yeah, because I think to what Tracy was saying, if I understand correctly, the robotic process, decision management tool, the Facil gateway, and the SQL in Azure, those are 4 aspects of the product. So you could draw one big box that says Facil, and it extends through those 4 levels of the stack. You click on it and it expands it into those 4 components. You click on one of the 4 and it takes you to another slide that provides additional detail on that particular item. Is that what you're saying, Anto?
Yes, I think that's what we're all kind of saying.
Well,
We're definitely either
provided
crossing. Sorry, I was going to say we're crossing dimensions or mixing metaphors or something here a little bit. Each time we use this, it's just interpreted a little bit differently. And I think it was you or somebody said, well, couldn't all of this be displayed in just the app part of it? Because technically it's all software with the possible exception of data in SQL. But then it gets back to, okay, well then in the real world, either it's software or it's hardware. So that doesn't give us much information, right? We're trying to dig deeper to understand this. So I'm a little confused and stuck on some of this and how best to represent this still though.
Well, there's also the dimension, guys, I keep trying to focus on, is there's a business layer of how much am I willing to tell you, right? Because until there's a bunch of, I'm sure in Facil, there's a bunch of secret sauce, and there's going to be a point of time I'm not going to let you drill down further unless we have NDAs and business relationships and a whole bunch of other things in place, right?
Well, and we did talk too about people versus products and so forth too. That's a sticky one to cross over, because the upper stuff is all about the people. Well, even from delivery potentially even up, all about people versus products, which is, or hardware or physical things, which is the whole bottom 2/3 of this.
Yeah, just to get back to your point, Anno, I actually had another slide that I was not going to show, which is actually the competition landscape slide.
Right.
Where I would put technology and things that are sort of in my radar. So
yeah, and I'm sure there'll be another slide that you've got in Patty that has a deeper dive into the delivery piece that you're not going to share unless you're in some relationship or NDAs or whatever.
Going back to that sort of core, which is your most valued child, which I know is a problem, is the way I was actually thinking about that is, if this is presented to somebody and they said, I love all of this, except that I don't want to use SQL, I want to use something else, right? Doesn't matter what, because that's my corporate policy, right? In you know, part of the way that a flexible offering could be structured is that you can say, fine, just take that out and plug something else in. So that's kind of the thinking of layering of it, is that you can actually compose different solutions using different pieces.
Or you can be one of the big four and go, no.
You could do that.
Right, that's an answer.
I want to offer a comment that relates to both Anto's presentation and Paul's here, which is I think the lack of clarity, confusion, whatever, would easily be solved by dotted lines around the square instead of solid, right? In both cases. For example, I think including, the physical layer provides context of what you're interfacing to where you work. But for example, I have a customer use our software and they actually build buildings also. So they can say physical because they build it, where you didn't mean that, Paul, right? I don't think building the school. Yeah. Okay. But yet I think both what you and Anto did to include all of the boxes that show where this all fits in the stack, that's useful. But I think if we just said, okay, you want to put it on there to show context, but you don't provide it dotted line around the box instead of solid, I think that would really clear things up. It's another spin on the idea of drawing a boulder box around just the components you provide. You could do it either way, but to me, in both presentations, that's the thing that I'm sitting here going, that would really help me.
A point I'd like to make is, from Word's point of view, is the word gateway keeps sticking in my craw. Gateway is kind of an aged word, and it used to mean a lot of things in the old days. And I think the way you're using it right now is completely different than the industry understands it. So I think you need to maybe reconsider that word, because for me, it trips me up, because I think of old gateways, and I don't think that's what you're talking about.
Well, is it just the difference between hardware versus software though, Ken? Because I know a little bit about their platform, or I'm assuming I know a little bit. And what they're doing is really that gateway function. They are taking something that speaks one language on this side and putting it out and communicating to a different language on the other side, which is what the old gateway boxes used to do too.
Okay.
Right? Am I right about that, Paul?
You are, yeah. And it also responds to outbound communication to the field.
Maybe it needs another word.
But there's certain writable points that you can manage through gateway technology.
Yeah, it's like a soft gateway versus
soft gateway might change it. Yeah, because I think everyone's getting caught up in. Yeah. Okay.
Just so
someone asked the question: Is it not just an API? I think it was Sabine. That's the question.
And another one is a protocol.
Protocol translator.
Yeah, definitely hardware to us older guys.
Yeah.
Building automation, Rosetta Stone.
Well, yeah, very good. Yeah, because you can see in the automation systems that are out there, they all have certain protocols they observe, certain features, not just the taxonomy, but just certain ways they communicate that have to be deciphered. So that's a fairly significant effort.
Could you just stop your share, Paul?
I do want to just come. Sorry.
Could you stop your share? Okay, I want to put up something.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
You were saying something, Anna?
Yeah, I just want to circle back to the question about, there's a stack like Paul's stack, which is obviously, at this point in time, and I'm not pointing out this is not good, bad, or otherwise, but in Paul's stack, it's all closed to Facil, right? And they've probably got a few APIs. In your stack, though, and you're all about cross-sharing between all these applications, right? So it'd be interesting to see and one more style of box that says, you know, for argument's sake, I've got that. I'm just pick on Paul for a moment. I've got that gateway, but the gateway, as much as it works within my stack of my applications and my interfaces and all my process and stuff, but it also has an API for others, you know, to get to, which is a separate visualization. It's not only do I use it between the stack levels in my product, but I have the ability to share that outside of my stack. So when I show, you know, if I, for argument's sake, Sky Foundry, you know, if I do Sky Spark, I could show Sky Spark, and there's a point of Sky Spark where it's got a Haystack API, right, where I can extract data out of Haystack.
Right.
It'll be good to know that I've got that external access, you know, to something else, even though I might not show it in the list. Does that make sense? Because I can't show everything that's Haystack.
Yeah, how far do we extend these dotted lines out? How many layers do we go to say we influence or connect or are a part of the ecosystem all the way up? It can kind of get out of hand, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
I've experimented with some drawing lines between these boxes, but it gets really, really complicated visually.
Yeah.
I
I think we need to separate the physical, even including software and the physical, versus the business processes here.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you end up, everybody could probably do a chart with this many boxes on it. Anyone who's delivering apps in that center piece, for instance, is influencing or connecting to, or, you know, associated with some other aspect of the stack, pretty much top to bottom.
And that's why I was saying
that's useful
Tracy,
in its own right.
Yeah, but then to Tracy's point, how you could go on forever putting dotted boxes, right? Versus, do you just put your box that has some other notation on it that says it can connect to other things, and I've got an API for that at that level, right? Because I could have a level at the gateway, I could have an API at the gateway level, at the database level, at the application level. You know, I could have APIs at all different levels. And
you
so
almost
rather
need
than
specific use cases that show those direct connections, right? Yeah.
So Sabine made a specific comment about, I think this refers back to Paul's, the fact that the gateway was above the data layer. And so interesting that you do conversion after the data layer. Is that how you actually do things, Paul, or is that just an artifact of how things are being depicted?
I think it's just an artifact. Since the exchange in the left column is sits on top of the data, it's just
This is your
it's certainly private because the data was there. It's below exchange, right?
Correct. Yeah. So it's not necessarily sequential top to bottom as you see it here.
All right. Well, we're past 4 o'clock. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you everybody for everybody's comments. And again, an invitation to people out there in the audience to show your stack. Come
I think
here.
Tristan put his hand up.
I'm talking to him. He's up for next week.
Cool.
We need more testing here, so to speak.
Beta testing.
More field application. That's right.
All right. Wonderful.
But I do think we all have agreed that the dotted lines around things that you're not doing is very important. Draw that distinction between a solid line and a dotted line in all future stacks.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Great.
Very
Video
good,
will be
guys.
up tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.